Welcome to Sun Coaches Podcast, Season 9, and I'm so excited today to be joined by the head coach at TL Hannah, Coach Jason Tone. Thanks for being on with me.
Thank you so much, Coach Lamb, for having me on. It's a pleasure.
We had some technical difficulties trying to get started, but anybody that's dealt with me knows that that's par for the course, and I tried to tell Coach Tone it was probably me, and it was. So we got that ironed out, and I usually ask everybody where they're from and where they grew up, but I know where you're from and where you grew up. You played at Lowndes County for the legendary Milt Miller, correct?
Yes, sir. You know, my dad was in the military, so he was in the Air Force, and so we were stationed at Moody Air Force Base for the majority of my life. I only lived 2 years outside of the state of Georgia. You know, we lived in New Mexico for a year and Florida for a year, and then we were in Valdosta the rest of the time. So I was fortunate enough to graduate and play for Milt Miller, who was a great man, and that's where I fell in love with football. Was in the great state of Georgia and in Valdosta.
So what year did you graduate?
I graduated in 1998, so I'm getting
Just
older and
missed it.
older. But I used to be the young guy on staff, and now I got guys that were born
You're an
after
old head.
1998. Yeah, so
You're an old
it's
head now.
it's definitely different.
Yeah, I remember being at that state championship game against Brunswick, standing on the sideline at the Concrete Palace, and it was impressive. That was the first time I'd been there, and the whole staff. I'd grown up knowing that whole staff, and it was just. I mean, they're the reason that I thought that that's how you did football. You got on a staff and y'all coached together your whole career, and you raised your kids together. And that's the way it worked, but unfortunately, that's not really how it always works out.
Yeah,
So,
it's
what
it's
all did
it's
you play
changed a
in
little
high
bit.
school?
I just played football in high school. I played offensive line for Jerry Davis, who, again, I still talk to him. I still talk to several of those coaches, but I played for Jerry Davis. I did not play, in middle school. It's not like I played my whole life or anything like that, but I started in ninth grade and, really, really enjoyed it. In fact, it was kind of the turnaround. Coach Miller had been there a couple of years, hadn't won a region game yet. And then our freshman year, it's still, again, we won the first three or whatever. And then, it wound up not being good. And then, my sophomore year, kind of got it turned around. And that was the year that senior class did a really good job, won like 7 straight with 7 straight shutouts. It was kind of flipped from there, and just the passion and the joy and, the community and all that. I just fell in love with it. It was a blessing.
So, did you get an opportunity to play at the next level, or did you just go to school to go to school?
There isn't many opportunities for a 5'9", 205-pound offensive lineman, back in those days. So, Coach Miller called me in and asked me what my plans were, and well, I said I'd like to be around football, but I was like, I can't really play, at the next level probably. And he's like, well, why don't you, he said, why don't you go take your community coach and I'll pay for it, and you can coach here while you go to college, because I was going to go to Valdosta State anyway. I went to Valdosta State. I got my community coaching license or whatever. I took the courses. You had to take a coaching course, a first aid and safety course, and things like that. So, did that and started coaching right out of high school. So all through college, I spread 4 years into 5, and coached ball the whole time.
So, you always knew you wanted to teach and coach.
Yeah, after my freshman year, I was like, I'm going to be a coach, and I was like, I'm going to be a PE teacher, and of course, I had a lot of guidance from coaches saying, you might not want to do that. They're cutting those positions. I mean, this is in the '90s, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing that. So I did. I went and got my phys ed degree and got my driver's ed add-on. So when I graduated from Iowa State, I started right at Lowndes. Randy Milt had already retired. Coach Miller, I have a hard time calling him Milt. Coach Miller had already retired, and so Coach McPherson was there, and he hired me, and I taught driver's ed and coached on the freshman team when I first started out. So I've had a great coaching experience, as far as I've worked for some really, really good men. So I was blessed to coach and play for Coach Miller. I was blessed to coach for Randy McPherson. I left there and went to Wayne County for a year and coached and worked under Craig Davis, who's now the head of the Coaches Association. And then I left there and went to Camden County and worked for Coach Heron. So I've been very fortunate. The Lord has blessed me to be around some great men as far as the coaching profession is concerned.
4 legends for sure. And so I don't have to go through your lineage and where you went. Where'd you go after that? So What year were you at Wayne County?
I was at Wayne County the 2006 football season.
That was my 1-9 season.
Well, we were 1-9 as well. So
I was
we
at I was at Richmond Academy.
okay. Yeah, hey, y'all's one win was against us.
Yes, that's my one win as a head football coach in the state of Georgia, and I thought I would get 3 other ones from the local schools, but it was not to be, and, I didn't have that one penciled down. I don't think y'all did either, but it was just a different universe. I was like, "Man, this region," the region was brutal. Like, people ask me all the time, and I'm like, "Well, Statesboro was coming off the state championship. They were in the region. Brunswick and Glen Academy were in the region. They were good." You had Rob Ridings was at Glenn, and Maurice Freeman was at Brunswick. Dan Ragle was the head coach at Ware County, and they had a kid that he was pretty good. That dude was a dude. I mean, they had a bunch of dudes.
Oh yeah,
Coach, Jack Webb was at Effingham County, and they
Effingham.
had 2 twins running the wishbone. They were good. Y'all were good. And then there were the Augusta schools. It was,
It was rough. It was
yeah,
rough.
that wasn't great. So you left Wayne and went to work for Coach Aaron. What all did you do? Like once you got to his staff, did you stay in the same position the whole time, or did you progress, or how did that
I
work
did.
working for him?
He hired me for the 2007 season. I coached running backs and I coached running backs the whole time I was there for 5 years. He gave me a lot of responsibility as far as game planning and things of that nature. And we had an unbelievable staff. I mean, we had a system where Coach Coffey, who was a great man, was the offense coordinator in the box. And Coach Heron, he didn't wear headsets. So, like, Coach Coffey would communicate to me and I would communicate to Coach Heron. I was, right beside him. And, again, I was, golly, I was 25 years old, maybe 26. And I got there, just working for Coach Aaron. I mean, I was at Lowndes when we had those wars in 2003 and 2004 with him. Just so much respect for him. Didn't really know him that well. And he'd go out there to the numbers, arguing a call or whatever. And Coach Coffee would get on the headset and tell me hey, you need to go get him. And I'm like, I just got this job. I'm not screwing it up.
Yeah, we're gonna let him cook.
Yeah, I'm gonna let him say his piece, and then I'll gently remind him to get back over here. So,
Yeah, it wasn't like you were
but
grabbing his belt loop and tugging on it or anything like that.
no, not yet. Not my first year. I kept my mouth shut. I listened and learned. I have a lot of respect for those men on that staff. I learned a ton, from those guys.
So, where did you go after Camden?
After I left Camden, I was there for 5 years. I became the head coach at Worth County. So I got the job in 2012. It's amazing how God works. The job came open and, I applied and, with my Coach Miller ties, I had an in, to at least get an interview. And, I wound up going over there and, they were crazy enough to offer a guy with no head coaching experience a job. So, I'm very blessed as far as that goes. It being my first job. Again, it was a smaller school. You go with these big aspirations thinking you know it all, coming in as an assistant. And then, you learn real quick what you don't know. So it was really good.
Well, what were some of the things as your first head coaching job? We've said so many times on here, it's like drinking from a fire hydrant. What were some things you knew going in? I've got to make sure this, and this gets done.
Yeah, well, it's just stuff that I tell my staff now when they go interview for head jobs. Like Coach Heron's super organized and his program's well run. We had 180 kids, things like that. I mean, it was just a ton of, so it was a little different. But when I got there, doing inventory, well, I've never really done inventory before. We had a guy on staff, Coach Vendette, did all the inventory in the equipment room and all that. So like getting in there and inventory and everything. That was the first time I did that. A booster club meeting. Well, I never sat in a booster club meeting. Coach Heron, he always ran the booster club meeting. We didn't have to go. But, those things where you were learning on the fly. And that first year, you felt like you were treading water just to try and keep your head up. But, it wound up coming together, hiring a staff, interviewing, talking to the current staff, things like that. The transition stuff that you have an idea, but it doesn't ever really turn out the way you expect, or how you envisioned it, and you always learn. It's kind of like being a parent, you want to have a kid, and then the baby's born. You're like, well, why is it crying? Like, is it hungry? Do I need to change it? So it's kind of the same thing. Yeah, it's kind of the same thing as a head coach. You kind of learn on the fly.
So who
So
was your principal at Worth?
I had several. I had several. Scott Chafin was 2 years, and then, my last year was, I can't the one who hired me, he was let go at the end of the year, so I got the job in February, and then he was let go, at the end of the year, so I didn't really get to work with him much, and then at the end, it was Harley Calhoun, but I was leaving as he was getting hired, so
Right.
I had,
Stacy
had
Bell was my mentor, and he was down there for a
he was
time.
at Fitzgerald whenever, he was
That's right.
already at Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
Russ Chesser, Dr. Chesser was the first principal that hired me. It took a second for it to click. I should never forget him because you know it when you're transitioning. I'm spending all week in Sylvester by myself, and he's letting me use his RV on the First Baptist Church grounds. While I stay there all week and then go drive home on the weekends. So,
So how long were you there? 5 years?
4 seasons,
4
4
seasons.
seasons. Yep, 12 and 6 through 16.
And that's when you got the T.L. Hanna job after that, correct?
All right. So, again, I had, you work really hard. You got it staff, you got it kind of going. We did some good things. I wouldn't say that we were dominant by any stretch. We're a 3A school playing up in 4A. We get put out on my third year by Buford in the second round, and then we get put out in the second round by Greater Atlanta Christian my last year. And I just kind of, I was trying to, I didn't do a good job delegating and managing things as a head coach. I tried to do it all by myself and I felt burnt out. So I resigned. I didn't really have a job. It wasn't like I was planning on going somewhere else. I was like, hey, I'm not going to be here next year. And this was in February. I'd already planned, but I had several sleepless nights and things like that where the Lord was working on me. And I finally gave in and Coach Herron, after I had resigned about a week or so later, he calls me and he's told me, it was after Grayson had won the state championship. He told me, he's like, hey, look, I'm going to Tijuana to be the head coach. You should come look at it and be my offense coordinator. So me, I'm a South Georgia guy. I wasn't going to leave the state. And, I told him, I was like, I don't want to coach above the Macon Dixon line, much less a different state. And anyway, we were going to a Wofford clinic anyway. So we went to the Wofford clinic and I drove by it and met him and just kind of met some guys on the way back. And it was a beautiful place. I came back up again and he talked me into it. So I went up there to be his offense coordinator for 2 years.
And then when he retired,
Yes, when
that's
he
when you got
retired.
promoted from within.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I was promoted. So he was there. I was his coordinator 2017 and 2018, and then in 2019, I was the head coach. I was promoted as the head coach.
So how many times have y'all won it since you've been there as an assistant or a head coach?
We haven't won it. We've played for it twice and lost. We lost to Dutch Fork when Coach Herron's last year in 18. It was just a heartbreaker of a game, but we were really talented, and so were they. But we lost in 18, and then we lost the COVID year in 20 to Dutch Fork again. And then we haven't gotten past the third round since. We were really talented in 23 and wound up playing Dutch Fork in the second round, and we missed a field goal to send it into overtime. So we're against them. They're a really good program.
Are y'all how does South Carolina, don't you guys have the Super 32? Is that still a thing? Or I know y'all do upper state and lower state, and then
Yeah. So before we got there, they had done like a big 16, little 16. They don't do that anymore, but it is upper and lower. So, your first 4 rounds, you don't really travel past, Columbia. It's all upper state teams. And then you play whoever comes out of the lower state. So the semifinals is the upper state championship and the lower state championship, and then the fifth round is the state championship, and that's either in Columbia, Benedict, or the last few years it's been in Orangeburg at South Carolina State. But they have the last 2 years they've done they split 5A, which is the biggest classification, into two classes, which almost made a big and a little. We were in the Division II Bay, which is the smaller of the schools. So, and we're not small, but comparatively, when they split it, we were on the small side. So we were, 5A Division two. They've done away with that this last realignment. They did away with it, and they made 1A single A twice the size and made everybody else. They tried to divide it up evenly after that. We got 1 through 5. The private schools we do have a non-high school league private school division, but the private schools are in there. We have a multiplier. I think Georgia has the same type multiplier. I think we do 3. I think it's a multiplier of 3 or something like that. So it is what it is. We don't have near as many schools as Georgia does, though. So
Yeah, I grew up in Augusta, so being right on the edge, I remember when I was coming up that they had the Super 32 back then. I didn't know if that was
yeah.
still a thing, and that was the way they handled, some of the more populated areas that had bigger schools, and that's how they did that. But I was just curious about that. So what were some things going in for your second head coaching job that you changed, that you learned from your first one coming in right off the bat?
Well, I told myself if I got a shot to do it again, because I had the itch, of course, after 2 years of being the coordinator, I had the itch to do it again. I told myself that I would do it differently. It wouldn't just be about the wins and losses, that I would try and, build men, and it would be more about culture and character and things like that. So I do a lot of different things pouring into young men that I did not do at Worth County. And that's just me being young and arrogant and ignorant, all combined, thinking you go in there and it's just all about the wins and losses. And pretty soon it becomes unfulfilling and tiring, and, I still want to win every game, and we've been fortunate enough to be successful. But again, at the end of the day, it's more, kind of pouring into those young men each and every day and trying to teach them life lessons and things of that nature.
Hey, coaches, if your team needs to raise money, check out Scoreboard Fundraising. In the past year, they've helped more than 1,000 teams across the Southeast run simple, effective fundraisers, from popcorn to online donations. Call Mike James at 770-680-3424 or visit scoreboardfundraising.com. A lot of teams I know are using these guys. Again, that's Mike James at 770-680-3424. I met those guys when we were at the Glacier in Orlando, and they're old coaches, or, some of them have coached. And the guy I met down there was actually he might have been on your staff when, or it might have been, I think it was before you guys got there, but I think it was before you were there, but they were on the staff that had the great VHS tape, the story, the story. So
I
I'm
got you.
sure you've heard the story. I think that was before you
Yes,
got there, but yeah,
it
VHS
was.
was before you would have got there. But so anyway, you take over, you've established it, you've been there for a while, you've got it rolling. What are some things that you do differently, or are the rules different in South Carolina to where how you approach spring practice at TL Hanna as opposed to how you might have approached it at Worth?
Well, Worth, we were a small school, so I chose to do the 2 scrimmages in the fall after my first spring practice. Once they allowed us to do that, I didn't even do spring ball, because all our kids were doing track or baseball or something like that. So here it's similar, but we do 3 days in helmets, 3 acclimation days, and then we get 10 days in pads. We don't get to compete against another team, but we use that time to evaluate, heading into the summer. So there's a lot of similarities, but now Georgia allows you to play somebody in the spring where they used to didn't when I was there. So I think if I was, doing it now, depending on the size of my school, and if there were a bunch of I would probably be interested in scrimmaging another team, if that was available. But it's not an option here. We're fortunate enough. We have an athletic class, an academic football class, so we get them for 110 minutes, every day. And in South Carolina, they don't regulate the school day. So if I wanted to, I could put pads on every day in the school. In January, I could start putting shoulder pads and helmets on, and we could just hit during the school day. Now, that would be foolish because, I mean, you burn yourself out. But, we are able to do some football stuff in class, legally and things like that, because they don't regulate the school day.
Is that on top of weight training? Is that a separate class from weight training, or is that included?
No, that includes weight training. So we'll lift, 3 days a week, and we'll speed train 2 days a week. And then from there, once we just started our mat drills, what we call Black Dawn. Again, we just started our mat drills. And so when we do those and bring them in before school and work them out on Tuesdays and Thursdays, then we'll start doing football stuff in class because we've already done speed and agility and making them face adversity and things like that.
Well, having that 110-minute class too, and I mean, whether it's weight training or it's a football class, whatever you want to call it, it also gives you an opportunity to do some of your character ed stuff with your kids,
Oh, yeah.
and if it's part of school, I mean, that's part of school. I saw something that really, well, it didn't disturb me because the more I pay attention to social media, the more I realize how ignorant the common man is. But some guy was arguing that, first of all, he doesn't understand what funds high school athletics because of his statements exposed his ignorance. But then he talked about how, high school athletics should receive zero funding at all from the school because all it is playing ball. And it's so much more than that.
Oh, yeah. If it was just about that, I mean, then we would be doing a disservice to the young men. Again, I got into this, profession because a coach poured into me. Several coaches poured into me. Again, I have two parents at home where unfortunately a lot of these kids don't. They don't have that father figure or a male figure in their life to show them right from wrong or how to be a man. They only know how social media tells you how to be a man or how music tells you how to be a man or things like that. And, a lot of those things, again, those are for entertainment and selling. That's not how I was taught or how I think a man should act. So I do use that opportunity to do our character ed on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I have a coach on my staff. They give a culture talk as well. That way it's not just my voice, it's other men, pouring into them. So we have players come back and speak to them, about their college experience and things of that nature. So it's been a real blessing. And again, something that I started doing when I started in 2019. Well, I didn't have a leadership council at Worth County. I have a leadership council here that I meet with once a week and take them to breakfast. And then we go, we do some kind of leadership material. I'm not smart enough to come up with stuff on my own. So like I either use John Maxwell or John Gordon or something like that. And just give them some lessons to how they can be a better leader. People tell us all the time, hey, I need you to lead here. I need you to be a good leader. I need you to be a better leader, but then they don't tell you how to. So I still remember after one of our games, I don't remember who we were playing, people from that were close to the program at Lowndes would come in the locker room and congratulate you and, high five you and slap you on the back. And this man, he was like, hey man, just keep leading out there. And I'm like, well, I mean, I don't understand what I did. I just played football, but the more I look back and learn what leadership is, yeah, I mean, he was right. I just didn't understand what I was doing at the time. So I'm trying to explain to these guys what a leader is and how they should lead our team and hold each other accountable. 110 minutes gives us an opportunity to do. That's a long-winded answer to say yes, we get an opportunity to use that.
Oh, no, it's fantastic. I think one of the things that our podcast provides that's a little bit different than everybody else is we don't talk about X's and O's, and God knows there's enough of that out there. And I just like people telling their story. And one thing that head coaches have shared with me is that they they hear what other people do. Everybody's fighting the same battles. Everybody, they have bad days, embrace the suck or, however you want to say it. It's just what you're willing to put up with.
It's a
So,
book I'm reading right now to embrace the suck.
yeah. So, that's we're doing the Twin Thieves. That's our book
Yep.
study. So, and
It's a
the
good one.
best thing that's ever been invented, I think, for the children today is audiobook, because if they can't read well or they don't enjoy reading, which a lot of kids don't, and even most adults don't enjoy reading, put it on audiobook, they'll listen and they'll talk about it. But if
Yep.
you tell them to read it, it can be sketchy. So you talked about spring, you've talked about your off season. What's something that, how has your approach to the summer maybe changed, or have you got a system that you've always used, and how you go into June and July?
Well, it's a little different than a lot of guys in our state. A lot of guys in our state will go 5 days a week or 4 days a week. We're a 3 day a week program. We go a little longer in those 3 days. We lift, we do some speed training, and then we do a shorter practice. But we're able to feed them breakfast and lunch while we're there. Whether they take advantage of it all the time, not so much. But just trying to let them be kids more. So, every weekend is a 3-day weekend. We go Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. So that's different. At Worth County, we did 4 days and it was Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. But so I've switched a little bit and tried to give them more day, because again, even if you go an hour longer a day, giving that extra day off or that 3-day weekend is the coaches and the players I feel like are more rejuvenated on Monday, or don't feel like you're trying to, just fry them, all summer. We do yeah, it's hard. You feel like if you don't do, you're getting left behind type deal. Some camps and things like that. But we take time to, do like, popsicle Tuesdays, and we'll do things where we brought a slip and slide out. We got a hill, and let them slide down there after one of the camps and do like a little slip and slide type thing. So just trying to make sure they're kids as well, and understand that all those kids, they don't love football like we do. I mean, they like football and they like being around, but they don't love it like I do. I'm immersed in it, but, try to make it the best part of their day, or the best part of what they do, as opposed to dreading it. I tell them, I'm sure you've heard it too. I was like, I don't want hostages. I want volunteers. I want you to feel like I'm holding you hostage. I want guys that volunteer and want to be here.
It's an extracurricular activity. You don't have to be here. Nobody's holding you against their will, or me parents might be, but I'm
Yeah,
not.
very
What,
true.
do y'all have are y'all allowed to have OTAs and things like that over there, or is it basically work on your own? Or is it Wild
Well,
Wild West and do what you wanna do?
we can't put pads on, but we do OTAs. So me and my athletic director had to go to Columbia like 5 straight weeks to get it passed. So we had been doing it since Coach Herring been here. We had been doing it not in pads. We host one. We would host it, and since 2017 at Teohana, we have been doing a defensive camp. We did it the same way. There was a year where Georgia wouldn't let you put pads on, and we went to West Georgia and still did it without pads on, and it went great. Super quick whistle and things like that. But so we took that model from that year when Georgia wouldn't let you put pads on, and we brought it to Teohana, and we'd been doing it. And then in 21 or 2022, the high school league was like, nah, it's interpreted that you can only do 7-on-7. Well, there's no rule that says you can't do 11-on-11. I don't, what else are we interpreting? I mean, like, I need to see the rule written out. Anyway, we got the language changed, and it took almost an act of Congress. We went and met several times, and they approved it. And so we are able to do OTAs. They can't, we can only do 10 total competition days. Okay. So any 7-on-7 event or whatever is a competition day. So you can do 10 competition days, but only 60% of them can be OT, like 11-on-11. We wrote it that way. That way, if they give us 12 days, well, now we get it, we get an extra day or whatever of OTA type deals. We're able to do that. We can't put pads on, like I said. And then, everybody's got the strict heat regulations and when you can do things and stuff like that. We have 2 dead weeks in July. We have the 4th of July week and the last week of July. And that's another thing I do. When school gets out, I give them that first week completely off. So we actually have 3 weeks where we don't do any football stuff in the summer. So on top of the 3-day weekends, we're trying to give them as much time off as we can. That way the parents know exactly when. If they're in our program, they know the 3 weeks that they won't have any football. If they want to schedule a long vacation, do a 3-day weekend, or they can leave Thursday at noon and go to Myrtle Beach and stay there Friday, Saturday, and come back Sunday, and be there 3 nights. So we just try to make it a little bit more convenient for them type deal.
Well, is July different for you than June as far as your schedule goes? Do you still just do 3 days a week, or do you add a day?
I don't. We do 3 days a week. We only get 2 weeks. I do 3 days a week. Now, I will say this, the last week is 4 days because our defensive camp is a Wednesday, Thursday, and we don't usually do Wednesday. It's usually Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. So that Wednesday, we do our defensive camp that we host as a 2-day deal. But the reason we do that is that's leading us into the season. So that's the last thing we do. They go on that dead week, and then when they come back, the season is officially started. So it's kind of a
Well, now that you're
capstone for us.
Gotcha. Well, now that you're an old head, I love asking this question. What are some things about the game that not the X's and O's, but just the high school game that's changed since you first got started in 2001 to 2002?
I mean, there's a lot, no blindside blocks, no, you can't cut, hardly anymore, period. Yeah, we used to set up we used to set up a wall, on punt return and just absolutely decapitate people, you know, in the early 2000s, late 90s. You can't do that. Yeah, I agreed with this one, now that you can throw the ball away. I never understood why the quarterback couldn't, like, if he got outside, just get rid of it. And, so I kind of agree with that one. And, they do it. I'm just trying to think of the other rule changes. Those are the main ones that pop into my mind. I still remember, when I played, people just cherry picking you off the pile. Like if you're standing around the pile, DB would come up and freaking blindside you and it wouldn't be called, things like that. So,
Well, we have Huddle now. You didn't have that when you started.
well, we definitely didn't have huddle, and I'll say, oh, never mind. I won't get on my huddle soapbox. So,
Well, no, I was gonna say or any other video.
yeah, it was all VHS. I
Handwritten
was I
notes.
was fortunate enough, I didn't when I got into coaching, they had already, kinda we didn't have to really drive very far to do those, in Wayne County and things like that, and then we had DVS, I think, was before Huddle or something like that. I don't think it was DSV, I think it was DVS. It was not what the colleges had, it was another thing. That's what we had at Camden, where we could share film online and things like that. So, it's definitely changed, the technology aspect used to coach on the sideline. Now, if your iPad goes out, you're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't see anything," I mean, and again, we grew up watching the play, and now and now if Huddle sideline or anything goes out for a series, you're like, "Oh, I don't know where they're at. Oh my gosh." So
Yeah, it's pretty
so,
cool getting to take the kids under the tent and going, "That's you not blocking him."
yeah, you screwed that up.
And
You
you don't have to
told
ask him
me.
anymore. Yeah, you don't have to
Yeah.
ask him anymore. Is he in a 1 or 2? Or what is he? He's over there, coach.
Drones, like flying drones and filming with drones, that changed at Worth County. I bought my first drone and we use those. There's a lot of catapult, we have catapult, GPS, for our players. A lot of different the analytics, who would have thought, hey, right here now, I know the chart says this, but go for it on fourth down. I don't know. A lot of it's more uh I guess chess-like, you know what I'm saying? My son plays chess, so kind of moving a couple of moves ahead or thinking a couple of things ahead. It's a lot different as far as game planning and your weekends. Your weekends, since COVID and Zoom and all that, and Google Sheets, that like a lot of those things have cut down on like needing to meet more on Sunday or bringing guys in on Saturday and Sunday. So there's a lot of benefits to the technology, even though me and you can't get this Zoom call hooked up or this podcast hooked up like we wanted to. But
We figured it out. We figured it
yes,
out.
sir. Yes, sir.
So what are some things that you look for with because the young coaches now a little bit different than we were, and with people having turf and things like that, they don't have to line fields and they don't have to do some of the things that we did when we were coming up. What are some things? Because I notice a lot of times they love titles and they love being the pass game coordinator on 3rd and +10 or whatever it is. I mean, when you're looking for an assistant head coach, do titles mean anything to you?
No, when I've had, I have staff turnover just like everybody's got aspirations. I try to help them get to those goals, mentor them the best I can. Chasing titles is unfulfilling. I did it, for the early part of my career. It's unfulfilling, and again, being the best coach that you can be where you're at, watering the grass where you're standing is so much better than looking over there at the grass on the other side or whatnot. I look to hire good people. When I interview people, I break down our program, what our program's about. They tell me about them. And then I go into it like, hey, I need a person that's going to pour into and build relationships with these kids. All right. and I can teach you our scheme, but I can't teach you how to be a good person. And, that was ingrained into you when you were younger, and then molded through your teenage years. Like, I need somebody that cares about these kids, not because of their talent or what they can do for them. I don't want you to use the kids. I want you to pour into them. And, we try to do that. And I try to hire men that will do that. And I've been very blessed. I have a really good staff and a lot of good coaches that do that. And so I'm, the core, everybody here except two, three, everybody here, I've got 18 guys and all but three I've hired or been a part of. Been very blessed as far as getting good men. But that's what I look for. Again, it's all, people can hide behind their resume and they can hide behind, even an interview. They can fool you in an interview. When you see them on the grass, you can see their heart, and that's what I look for, and that's how I try to shape my guys as well. And when I coach them, because again, that's another thing. Being a young head coach, you got to coach your coaches. I still remember, and I love him to death. He was great. Richie Marsh was at Thomasville, and he was like, "Man, it's the grown folks that you have the hardest time with, not the kids." That was me my first year, just trying to get some advice. So I'd really try to pour into those to the men as well. And I'm still a work in progress. I'm not going to sit here and say like I got it figured out because I don't. But that's kind of where I'm at as far as trying to make sure I'm pouring into those guys and hiring guys that want to pour in and give back to those kids.
Well, Coach, you've poured into them over the years as you were poured into as a young man. And I just appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and continuing to do great things at TL Hanna.
And I appreciate you letting me come on here and share my story. And, again, I enjoy listening to your podcast. I still have ties in Georgia. I look from afar on the other side of the state line and just to keep up with my friends and some former coworkers over there. So it's always good to talk ball and to talk life with a fellow Georgian.
Thanks, Coach.
God bless.